Hey gang, little change for this week. If you tuned in for me taking apart terrible arguments with attempts to be humorous, that's not happening this time. I've got a good one lined up for next week. Someone's arguing, among other things, about how trees know how to make fruit that's perfect for humans. We're gonna have fun with that one, so if that's the kind of thing you're looking for, you might want to skip this week. It's gonna get somber today. As I'm sure many of you already know, last week a coward in Toronto, Alek Minassian, took a rental van and deliberately drove it into a crowd of pedestrians. 10 people were murdered by this piece of human excrement before being apprehended by the police. Now, full disclosure, I'm originally from the Greater Toronto area. I hung out on Yonge Street often in the past, so hearing where this took place makes it feel somewhat personal. At the time of the killings, and before his name was released by the media, Minassian released a Facebook post taking credit for the attack and identifying himself as an incel. The CBC and Facebook have confirmed this post does belong to Minassian. For those that don't know, incel is a contraction of involuntary celibate. In other words, this guy couldn't get laid, so he decided to take out his frustrations on unrelated innocents. At first glance, this whole incel movement, with their cries of Chad and Stacy, might seem like a joke, or people we could take pity on. But this walking dung heap, along with the gentleman that he's praising, Elliot Rodger, the perpetrator of the Isla Vista killings in 2014, shows that the hatred inherent in this ideology is something that needs to be taken seriously. The incel community, consciously or subconsciously, is shaping their members in the same way that reactionary religious and racist organizations like ISIS or the KKK do. They prey on those unsatisfied with the world and people around them, and instead of helping them deal with it and making positive change, they turn their frustrations into anger. Like racists blaming their issues on those from a different ethnic background, or religious zealots blaming their problems on heretics and infidels, these misogynists are simply upset they can't get laid, turn to other guys in the same situation who also blame their problems on women, or as they like to call them, femoids, in an attempt to dehumanize women, until their hate and anger spirals out of control and results in a massacre. The canonization of Saint Rodger, as he's known in many incel circles, just feeds this attitude. The stories go around claiming how great he was and what a good thing he did. It gives jagoffs like Minassian a push to commit his own atrocities under the guise of following their deified example. Guess what? Elliot Rodger was an incompetent loser. The women he targeted outwitted him by locking their door. So, like the angry little boy he was, he threw a tantrum and decided to hurt people around him who were not the target of his rage, but just happened to be around the area at the time. These aren't the actions of a saint or a gentleman, just a bungling fool who managed to rack up a body count of people who had nothing to do with his issues. They don't even care about their own lives anymore. They just want to hurt others and cause as much pain as possible before they end what they see as suffering. Rodger killed himself before he could be arrested, and when the police caught up with Minassian, he told them that he had a gun in an obvious attempt of suicide by cop. There have been many issues with the Toronto police in the past, but I have to give them props for not being goaded into giving Minassian exactly what he wanted, arresting rather than killing him, which I'm glad about. Going out in a blaze of glory can be seen as a romantic end to these losers. Being caged in a cell just might show off what ignoble endings acts like these deserve. Look, I get similar people gathering together for support. The originator of the term incel envisioned a community where people like her, who were unsure how to date or were socially awkward, like Minassian apparently was, could support each other and try to figure out how to change themselves in a way to assist their dating lives. But it morphed into a community where instead of inclusive people bettering themselves, it became a bunch of angry men turning their vitriol at the women who denied them what they thought is their right, and anybody else who didn't share their pain. Extreme acts like this are much easier to carry out when you have others agreeing with you there is no hope and everyone else deserves to pay. This is the second largest mass murder in our country's history, the largest being the L'École Polytechnique, again motivated by misogyny. Mass reactionary attacks based on somebody's gender is not something we can ignore, and we cannot forget why this occurred. The only hope I can get from this is that the government and law enforcement agencies will understand that these communities that continue to praise and encourage violent acts are not something that can be ignored, and hopefully will find a way to prevent future attacks like this. I'm going to state this plainly. You are not owed sex by anybody. I think society does owe its members certain things: education, healthcare, a social safety net, but sex with someone who doesn't want it? No, that's pretty much rape. Yeah, if you can't get any, it can feel awful, but nobody owes you anything in regards to you getting laid. The so-called Chads and Stacys of the world might be having sex with everybody but you. You have to suck it up and deal with it like a big boy, not a toddler having a tantrum. If you think the world is conspiring against you to keep you from getting your dick wet, seek professional help. Trained and qualified therapists do exist. Don't turn to a group of anonymous strangers whose echo chamber will tell you to embrace your anger, or that people who perpetuate these attacks are heroes. They're not. Anybody who deliberately goes out to murder innocent strangers just because of a belief they are owed sexual favors from anybody is a cancer on society. Death and destruction just for the sake of hurting people, just because you can't stand how you're feeling, makes you a monster. Oh, and as a final note, so classy some of the rightish leaning media screaming that this was Muslim terrorism before any of the facts were in. Good job jumping to conclusions, guys.